We're fighting to drain the swamp, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And you see why we have to do it.
America, I am telling you right now, wake up. Wake up and stop listening to this nonsense, this babbling.
In order to send it over to the Senate and to have the provisions in there to pay for the impeachment, and then the next step, the whatever you want to call it, the trial.
America, wake up. I just can't take it. There's nobody saying anything that is actually going to help people. Here's what it is. This is really, really bad for the collective.
Well, the moment the framers feared has arrived. A political faction in the lower chamber have succumbed to partisan rage.
Your money is in banks. If we go through another banking collapse,
the vote did not reflect what had been proven. It only reflects how they feel about the president. The Senate must put this right.
America will change overnight.
It doesn't feel like impeachment. And you know what? It's a phony deal. And they cheapen the word impeachment. It's an ugly word, but they cheapen the word impeachment. That should never again happen to another president. And I think you'll see some very interesting things happen over the coming few days and weeks.
You need your money in a local credit union. You need your money in a local bank. You need your money in a local bank that is not affiliated with these big banks. Please do your own homework. And stop listening to the nonsense that is out there. Stop.
Political factors play absolutely no role in our process, and my colleagues and I would not tolerate any attempt to include them in our decision-making or our discussions.
Yesterday was an unbelievable day to see the Speaker of the House do what she did about a document that she hadn't even seen. And my guess is because they are so focused on attacking the individual the American people made President of the United States, that they're looking for anything and everything. The Michael Cohen hearing didn't work for them. The John Dean hearing didn't work for them. The Mueller report and Mueller hearing didn't work for them. The Lewandowski hearing didn't work for them. So let's do a press conference and let's talk about something we haven't even seen, because maybe that'll work.
An interesting thing that happened that led the Fed to do this. See, this is what happened. Interest rates shot up in the repo market, something that has historically spelled disaster for the U.S. economy. So the Fed, as we've been reporting exclusively, has been responding by pumping billions of dollars to help the banks stay afloat. Now, at first, the Fed made this sound as if the whole thing was just a temporary, it's a minor glitch, they said, in the system.
Look, if Britain leaves, it is opening the door. It is going to be the beginning of the end for the Eurozone.
And it's great news that in Poland, opinion polls now show a majority of Poles think they'd be better off outside the European Union. Brexit is the beginning of the end of this project.
I've been saying, I wrote about it in 2009, that I believe that a one world currency is the very thing that is going to usher in the one world government. you're not going to have a one world government until you have a one world currency, and the one world currency is going to be the excuse to develop this one world government.
Let me put this to you, and you guys can debate this. What if the man's already won the fight? What if him being in office puts the shiver in his enemy? Can't that be a possibility? When he talks the way he talks with the bravado that he brings, sure, he's a salesman. Sure, he's been a successful business person in the past. But what if he's already won the battle? The battle I'm speaking about is against the elite of this world. The corporate CEOs that have been untouchable while they lobby all of our politicians, Republican and Democrat, and all over the world to shape the reality of the world according to their needs and wants. He's already won, folks. He's untouchable. Trust the plan.
On this solemn day, I recall that the first order of business for members of...
The other thing is, when you look at the Congress, though, it's like 24 hours since John McCain was put to death.
It's like 24 hours since John McCain was put to death.
I've been getting into it on Twitter this morning with people over this, is that people are saying this is just free speech, you're being a snowflake, you're so sensitive. First of all, you're talking about sitting senators, and you're talking about Congress people, Maxine Waters, Mitt Romney, Adam Schiff, Bernie Sanders, President Obama, the Clintons, my father, you can't kill him again, but whatever.
I think in light of all of the things going on, and you know what I mean by that, the fake news, the Comeys of the world, all of the bad things that went on. It's called the swamp. And you know what happened? And you know what I did? A big favor. I caught the swamp. I caught them all.
in order to send it over to the Senate and to have the provisions in there to pay for the impeachment. And then the next step, the whatever you want to call it, the trial.
Before my election, Washington politicians stood by and did nothing while China ransacked our companies, stole our intellectual property, subsidized their industries at the expense of ours, and dumped their products in a deliberate strategy to close American factories all across our land. For many years, Americans, leaders have just sat back. Maybe they didn't understand what was going on. It's impossible to believe that. But they just let it happen. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now we've changed it. It's changed a lot. I'm sure you haven't noticed, but it's changed a lot.
Now, the central bankers of the mainstream media, they are starting to panic. And I believe, and Trump's trade deals all come online, the economic system is going to boom.
This comeback is a series of bold initiatives to reform a broken system of international trade. We want thriving commerce with as many countries as possible, but trade must be fair, and to me it must be my favorite word, reciprocal.
We understand what's coming.
What they were doing and what they would have done if I didn't make a certain move that was a very important move, because it would have been even worse if that's possible.
Tolu, let me just go to you first. We saw 2 executive orders, both to do with financial regulation. The president seeming to be extraordinarily happy that this is happening. Will they have any teeth? Does it go anywhere?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What we've seen is the president go into these meetings with the executives and then go directly into the Oval Office and sign executive orders. He wants to make a show of the fact that he's listening to business leaders and signing executive orders that would lead to the growth in the economy. Specifically, these 2 executive orders that he signed, they're sort of starting the process for having teeth.
This is the subject of financial stability, the Oversight Council. Very important. Okay, this one's heavy.
And it's going to blow everything that we know about the economy out of the water.
The technology likely to have the greatest impact on the next few decades has arrived. And it's not social media, it's not big data, it's not robotics, it's not even AI. And you'll be surprised to learn that it's the underlying technology of digital currencies. I believe that this is now the next generation of the internet, and that it holds vast promise for every business, every society, and for all of you individually. You know, for the past few decades, we've had the internet of information. And when I send you an email or a PowerPoint file or something, I'm actually not sending you the original, I'm sending you a copy. And that's great. This is democratized information. But when it comes to assets, things like money, financial assets like stocks and bonds, loyalty points, intellectual property, music, art, a vote, carbon credit, and other assets, sending you a copy is a really bad idea. If I send you $100, it's really important that I don't still have money and that I can't send it to you.
That's why I'm here today to talk to you about something called a blockchain that is emerging and that will do for our money system what the internet did for information and what the internal combustion engine did for transportation, by making it more swift, cheap, widespread, granular, and did I already say fast? Yes.
It can take a second for an email to go around the world, but it can take days or weeks for money to move through the banking system across the city. And they take a big piece of the action, 10 to 20%, just to send money to another country.
Somehow, in this era of astonishingly advanced communication technologies and transportation networks, our money system lags a little bit behind. So we have a lot of points that are kind of pain points where there are maybe inefficiencies, excessive strangulating fees, or what the classifieds back in the day used to call missed connections. So for example, we can now talk live to somebody in Mongolia over video chat. But if we want to send them $20, it might take a week.
So to understand what a radical change this is going to bring, let's look at one industry, financial services. Recognize this? Rube Goldberg machine. It's a ridiculously complicated machine that does something really simple like crack an egg or shut a door. Well, kind of reminds me of the financial services industry, honestly. I mean, you tap your card in the corner store and a bit stream goes through a dozen companies, and each with their own computer systems, some of them being 1970s mainframes, older than many of the people in this room. And 3 days later, a settlement occurs. Well, with a blockchain financial industry, there would be no settlement because the payment and the settlement is the same activity. It's just a change in the ledger. So Wall Street and all around the world, the financial industry is in a big upheaval about this, wondering, can we be replaced, or how do we embrace this technology for success?
Because remember, Ripple always was different from Bitcoin in that you could put anything of value in it, right? So this idea of kind of, we would call it IOUs or balances, but really being value agnostic, and that then being the engine for the exchange of that thing of value. But having the combination of ILP with XRP, we think that's kind of the killer formula.
Yeah, so now you can have any type of value, like any currency, but also any type of ledger. So like anything from a centralized ledger to a blockchain, et cetera.
And if we look at kind of stepping way back, kind of the macro problem that we think, again, the world has, this lack of an internet of value. You can kind of argue that this gets to the heart of the problem with globalization, which is obviously under a lot of stress today, right? It's kind of not working for a lot of people. And we kind of, we don't think of it as like, well, globalization's bad. We think of it, globalization's actually incomplete. Until you have an internet of value, you really can't have true globalization. You sort of need these three core interoperability technologies working all together. You need interoperability of data, of goods, and money. And then we think really good things happen when the world finally has a full kind of a globalization platform. But this has to happen. And again, what is this meaning now that we don't have it right now? It means, we all know sending $50 to Europe is kind of impossible, right?
Yeah.
We know the example of the Airbnb host in Tanzania who should be making $29 on a rental, and by the end of the day, $9 is showing up. This is an actual example, right?
So around payments, we think XRP is uniquely and extremely well positioned to solve that payments problem. It's extremely fast, at about 3 seconds per transaction, and it costs about 1/1000th of a penny to actually enable that transaction. So we often make the point that where Bitcoin is very profound in solving that store of value, an XRP transaction's about 1,000 times faster and it's about 1,000 times cheaper per transaction.
Know that there's a lot said about democratization and the internet of value and these kinds of things, but I think the reality is that what we can achieve with Ripple is a genuine democratization of a payment network, because at the moment what we have is the SWIFT system, which everybody understands, its boundaries, its constraints, and effectively what we're doing is we are making banks into exchanges for payments. But where I think with XRapid there's a real opportunity is that there is the chance for anybody to join this network, and in that sense work perhaps with the banks and take a bit of the load off them. But there's no reason why, for example, two people couldn't be members of the XRapid network, and we wouldn't necessarily have to go through a clearing bank or more, which just makes the speed of transfer so much faster. And if that means that more people join the global economy and we get an uplift out of poverty, and if we bring more countries into trading with the rest of the world, that can only be a good opportunity as far as I see it.
And of course, more savvy customers, they're driving our business. They're saying, we've got goods moving across in container ships that are changing ownership before they get from one place to another. They need to have the currency available as it changes ownership from one port to another. And then think about aircraft as well. It may take days for a ship to get one place to another. Now think of aircraft taking goods from UK into Brussels, takes an hour. Ownership can change across that time. Payment needs to be made in real time. So you need to find the right payment solution.
Again, to tell you a story, 3 years ago, we actually experimented with 12 banks across different geographies who did not have pre-funding relationship with each other. We gave them a bunch of digital asset called XRP and asked them to use it to see if it works for cross-border payments as a bridge currency. They came back to us after 6 months and they said, look, it works beautifully, but we cannot use this. And there are two issues with this. Number one, it's highly volatile. so we cannot use it. Number two, my regulator will never allow me to use this. There is no risk weighting to this, and it's too volatile. There is no way the central banks will allow me to use this. This was in 2015-16. So what we did was, and this is 3-4 years ago, before the whole concept of stable coins came into being. So we went back to the drawing board and came out with a new product, as I mentioned, ODL, on-demand liquidity. And basically what that product does is, through that product, banks do not have to hold a digital asset on their books. They could leverage that product, connect with a digital asset exchange, which, mind you, is fully licensed and supervised, and then leverage that exchange to source liquidity in real time.
Who held cryptocurrencies at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018? Your government did it. And Christian Caro, the head of the CFTC, admitted. He got with Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, Gary Cohen, the NEC head. He was the head of the CFTC, and Donald Trump, to rig the markets, to destroy the price of Bitcoin, because they did it.
You said pretty bluntly in your speech, Governor, that Bitcoin has failed or has largely failed as a currency. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's there's sort of three ways to measure a currency. First, is it a store of value? Is it reliable? Does it hold a stable value? I mean, clearly, anyone who looks at on your Bloomberg screen the volatility of Bitcoin, it's 10 times more volatile than sterling. It's not a stable core hold of value, but I think the most important thing is that actually working as a medium of exchange, how well can you use it to buy goods? It's not that efficient. For example, it costs about 1.5 pence to use cash, 8 pence to use a debit card in the UK, swipe cards, your iPhone. It costs about £2 to use Bitcoin on a transaction basis. You layer on top of that the environmental cost and other factors. It's just not that good at doing what it's supposed to do, but it does point the way in many respects to the future of money, and that's what's interesting. So there's a glass half empty. We're not worried about it displacing sterling or the US dollar or other conventional currencies, fiat money, but it does throw a challenge, these cryptocurrencies throw a challenge to central banks and those who oversee payments systems and markets of how to reorganize those to better serve customers.
Some of the BRICS economies have been increasingly enthusiastic about finding alternatives to the SWIFT system. Now we all know the SWIFT system has a lot to do with the dominance of the US dollar. So some of these economies already finding their alternatives. What does that mean for the BRICS finding their own ways forward despite of the turbulence?
I think that it has very much to do with what we were talking about finding alternative governance and finding alternative financial system, because since Bretton Woods, the world global financial system has been controlled by the largest debtor nations of the world, except for Germany, and creditor nations like China and the BRICS countries did not have much of a voice. You know, why does the World Bank and IMF always have to have an American and European president? Why not a Chinese president? Why not a Russian president?
So when you adopt an alternative to the SWIFT system, it is certainly bringing some kinds of hope that there will be more equal opportunities among economies. But the question really is, how sustainable will that be? How welcome that will be?
Well, it has really reduced reliance on the dominance of the US dollar, because the member states' currency can be there to denominate the value. And also, over the recent years, they also trying to raise local currency as deposit to support the infrastructure development.
So the same thing goes for SWIFT. SWIFT is a system where the United States has total control over, and it can be used, and there has been in the past, for, let's say, political reasons. And to, when you have isolate countries' financial system, you can use that. So I think that it would be very important for the BRICS countries to have their own system if they can do it.
This is the de-dollarization of the global economy that is slowly creeping in. It's the inevitable consequence of the United States using economic and financial, specifically sanctions, against countries with which it disagrees. Once you start doing that and you start leveling these sanctions against many countries at the same time, it's inevitable that they will start looking for alternatives. So the dollar is still, without doubt, is the dominant currency, but we're seeing the very beginning of a major change, which will be on a par with the tectonic geopolitical shift that we're living through in the world, with new nations staking a claim to, formulating the rules of the global game. And in the financial world, we've got the same thing going on, and it's. I don't think this is a trend that will really be reversed or stopped.
Yeah, look, remember we talk about the size of economies.
Yep.
Everything gets paid for. So think of how big the payment system is as big as the global economy, and maybe bigger than that because things multiply through the system. Parts of the world right now have digitized in payments, but I think the parts of the world that have digitized are the lesser unregulated banking or payments markets where you can be in the payments business as a non-regulated or unregulated entity.
Like China?
Okay, like China. Like China would be a good place. In the more regulated markets, Europe and the United States, I think the market will digitize and we will end up in a digital payment system, but it's going to look very much like a banking, highly regulated digital payment system. So you're going to need a digital payment system that has know your customer, anti-money laundering. It's going to have some type of audit trail, and it's going to have to really coincide with what the traditional banking laws are. But I think digital payments really is the future for everything we do.
Okay, but how is the current system going to be disrupted? Are they still going to be here in 2 years? Or is, some of the ventures that you're working on going to just change and take over?
So there are many, many, many people in the payment space trying to disrupt it. Not all of them are going to survive. That I know for sure. Some major disruption will happen. There will be some winners and there will be some losers. I think the winners will be those that understand that Europe and the United States are going to look like a more regulated market than an unregulated market. So to the extent that you're playing with that in mind and you're building a platform, and you're building technology that dovetails with the existing regulation, I think you've got a very good future ahead of you.
I'm not going to speak about the particular product. It's not appropriate for me to do so. But the announcement was a focal point for regulators of different types to recognize that digitization and the digitization of the plumbing and other aspects of our financial system, including payment transfers, et cetera, it is coming. What I'll say, just the natural economic forces that it unleashes, taking fat out of the system, for lack of a better term, it's happening. Now we have to recognize that that's happening, recognize our mission, safety and soundness, investor protection, fair markets, and ensure that as that digitization takes place, we're being true to those principles. But we should not be fighting that digitization, because if we fight it, it will go around us. It's here.
This year.
It's here. It is here already.
Yeah, I see. It's here. Yeah, it is here.
The fourth industrial revolution is just beginning, and a new economy is emerging. And you're here because that new economy demands a new finance.
Well, I would say revolutionizing international finance is not something that you would expect to happen overnight.
A new finance to support the major transitions underway across the globe, and a new finance to increase the financial sector's resilience.
So if you think about a payment system like SWIFT, where you just kind of push a payment message out, and you don't necessarily know the entire path, and you don't know the fees until later, you don't even know if the destination account even exists until sometime later when the payment is actually processed by the destination institution. There's no way that you could build instantaneous settlement into a system like that. So we kind of found ourselves in this situation where if we wanted institutions to settle their international payments with a digital asset, we first had to rebuild the payment messaging, sort of the plumbing.
The way at Ripple we view cross-border payments as sort of the most practical use case for digital assets. more recently, we've seen global consensus from countries across the world, including the UK, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, noting that XRP is not a security, but in fact a hybrid between a utility and settlement token. And again, I just reiterate that we do not see crypto as replacing fiat. We see opportunities for the two to coexist, and we see significant benefits from building network of networks.
I told you how the two F-15s in Q2675 were connected to February 15th and to the integrity of the flow of government funds, and that it was connected to Q2674 through the Y equals 25 second delta. Now let's take a look at the stock market. Why? Because government fund circulation has an impact on the health of the economy and therefore indirectly on the markets. Did you notice that on 0215, the Dow jumped 444 points and closed at 25,883.25? Do you see it? These two 25s are the letter Y, and Peruvian coffee, for those who noticed, the 883rd letter of the alphabet is also Y. The Dow that day was YYY, and Q coded it in the timestamp delta 2 weeks before. Let that sink in. How is this possible? What's going on? The answer is in the art of the deal. Read very carefully. The white hats have taken control of the stock market. People think I'm a gambler. I've never gambled in my life. To me, a gambler is someone who plays slot machines. I prefer to own slot machines. It's a very good business being the house. Donald J. Trump, The Art of the Deal. Now the next question would be, why the letter Y? The answer is in Q142 and Q667, where we learn that the three Y families and their ancient satanic bloodlines controlled the Fed and the stock market. They flexed their muscles on February 2nd, 2018, when they made the Dow plunge 666 points. In the Air Force One reflection riddle, I told you how they also sent the North Korea B2 message to Trump through the July 3rd, 2017 NASDAQ glitch. These were the two major messages to Trump from Family Y issued from the stock market and reminding him they controlled it. Well, on February 15, 2019, exactly 54 weeks after their second message, the Maestro responded with the Dow hitting YYY, which represents the three family Y in Q142. Peruvian coffee for those who deciphered the meaning of 54. Since 54 equals 2 plus 2 times 26, it means you picked the letter B and then circled the alphabet 2 times, which is coded by B2. By putting the Dow at YYY 54 weeks later, the Maestro is saying, hey you, the 3Y families from Q142, I got your B2 and 666 messages about the stock market. Here's my response. Goodbye.
I want to turn to first, though, the world's cash. $100 bills, most of it, disappearing and unaccounted for. And apparently there's a quest to find out what happened to $1.5 trillion of U.S. $100 bills. What's going on?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, the dollar is the reserve currency of the world, right, and everybody wants to hold dollars. And the reason why they want to hold dollars is because the U.S. is a safe place to have your money, to invest, and to hold your assets in right, U.S. dollars. And, you know, it is interesting because in the world where everything's going digital and electronic payments, the demand for U.S. currency continues to go up. And literally, you know, a lot of these $100 bills are sitting in bank vaults all over the world. And particularly in a world of negative interest rates, you know, you can hold U.S. dollars and you don't have to lose money. So there's a lot of Benjamins all over the world.